Well, friends, I have no idea what we should be talking about tonight. I don't know if you have. Anyone got any thought? Oh, yes, there is something I must say. There was almost today a miscarriage of justice. When the snores broke forth in the relaxation, virtually by reflex, I braced myself to spring and jump up and down on Sean. I suddenly realised it wasn't Sean.
Thanks be to God, because people were saying to me this morning, well, thank you, Alan. You're my friend.
I must say, friends, there is a confusion sometimes between relaxation, meditation, and having a kip. Now that's not so drastic, so long as it's not too audible. Almost always the culprits are male. But as today, the culprits in the plural included a female. Now, it's a good principle to do Shavasana with your head somewhat supported. In fact, the further down your chin is, the less likely are you to snore. Or the less likely are you to sleep, and if you sleep, to snore. Perhaps you could keep that one in mind. More important, the thread of awareness has to be maintained in Shavasana. And deep relaxation leads on to a state called Yoga Nidra, which is the most passive form of meditation. Meditation can be passive, it can be dynamic, and various shades in between. The most passive form is literally called yoga sleep, in which the body is totally relaxed, as in sleep. The respiration is as in calm sleep, but the mind is gently alive. If the thread of awareness is maintained, that possibility is present. If we just go to sleep, then of course it doesn't happen. Now, what should we talk about tonight? What would you like to explore tonight? My word, that's a sure way of gaining the most impressive ush. So,
the relaxation is supposed to, among other things, lower blood pressure. If you've already got fairly low blood pressure, what's the effect then?
no, nothing.
I mean, it just keeps it at that level.
Yeah.
It doesn't sort of depress it further.
No.
Can we explore more about meditation and its relevance for us?
Well, what does us think? Do we want to explore meditation?
Yes.
What do we think about meditation? What do you think about meditation?
Well, my first impression here of meditation was I was like Suzuki's book, Beginner's Mind, you know, that I didn't know what it was about. And I think that was the best thing really that ever happened to me, in the sense that I just went along with it. So I had no predisposition to any conceptualizing or anything like that. So knowing less, I realized it was the best thing in retrospect. But the more you read about it, the more cluttered you can become if you're not aware that you're just reading for reading's sake or looking for results. But I certainly find that I asked you last year, or last August, that I found that my Hatha Yoga was beginning to wane, and I found that meditation seemed to be predominating. Is that a fairly common path? Does that actually happen? You suggested at the time that it was either not me, but one could be getting lazy or indifferent, not as a result, but I found that the meditation seemed to be taking over.
Well, it's the usual order of things.
Sure, one slides out at the end, but I still want to do the Hatha Yoga.
Yeah. And the two shoulds be hand in hand. I'm definitely not in favour of those schools which say on the one hand you must do 12 years of solid gymnastics before you even mention the word meditation, and be able to position the body in all sorts of extraordinary ways before meditation can be considered. I'm definitely not of that school. Similarly, I think many people have been misled over the past few decades, perhaps over the past few generations, by visitors from the East who would tend to call themselves Raja Yogis, or Vedantists whose central practice is meditation, and who would maintain that this short incarnation is a great privilege. Don't waste it on anything except the most vital and essential thing, that is meditation. Bend all your energies to gain the great enlightenment, moksha. Nothing else matters. Do not waste time on any practices which cannot possibly yield enlightenment, such as standing on your head or other bits of nonsense like breathing through alternate nostrils. All that is irrelevant. All that matters is going straight for the goal and discarding anything else.
Is that your experience now?
What?
Have you gone for the goal and realised you had to support it with a physical aspect of yoga? You sound like you are.
What do you think?
Yes,
What's your perspective?
My perspective is that I came through as you know, Guru Maharaj's teaching was. What could I do with the 4 techniques? So, I'd agree. But they do have a point though, don't they? Because there is limited time.
They have a point in the sense that they are pointing. They are the finger pointing at the moon, if you use a Zen expression.
I think one's got to ask whose goal. I mean, somebody, whether it comes from East or somebody here, I mean, there's a particular institution here which concentrates on teaching of Raja Yoga and nothing but Raja Yoga, and they're not interested in anything else. Exactly what you're saying. But really, is that relevant to us puny mortals? One has got to ask whose goals are we talking about? I mean, some people want to achieve that as a goal, fine, good luck to them. But if a lot of people want to live in this world and to be able to live it better, is that necessarily for them?
Yes, first we build ourselves up physically so that we're no longer puny anymore, and then we could just concentrate on meditation.
That's looking at it in terms of stages of graduated development, yes. Any other thoughts on that, friends? So,
I think a lot of people in the West, at least some of the people I've been talking to at dinner, seem to have other forms of exercise that they take, and therefore some people like that might feel that meditation is the one thing that, for example, aerobic exercise or gymnastics or other things don't give them. So in terms of a balanced physical and mental program, it might balance it better, whereas if they had one more physical thing, probably they don't have time for it. It depends as to what kind of life one leads.
Any other thoughts, friends?
Only that what seems to be coming up is this whole question about whether we are trying to adapt to life as a therapy, or whether we're trying to transcend life. Do you see the point I'm trying to make? Not very well.
Yes, I have to tell you, friends, we're in danger of getting into very deep water this evening. Carry on, sir.
Well, that's
it.
No, I think you put it very succinctly. I think it's the right yogis who want to transcend life. At least I can only speak for myself. I certainly want to adapt. And this is the life I have, and I want to lead it as best as I can. And so far as yoga, and I'm not against meditation, but yoga in its integral form helps me to lead a better life. Yes, that's my interest in yoga. But self-realization in God is not my goal, and that's not my interest. And in fact, even true yogis in quote would say, well, and the Raj yogis do, that you are not concerned with the goal, the ultimate goal. It's the process that matters. It's a question of how you reach, what kind of process, and there are different ways of doing it.
What were you going to say, Alan?
I was only going to say that certain mystics will maintain that being in right relationship with the earth also is being in right relationship with the heavens, and one invoke the other, which is another side of this question. And also Jung would say that the reason that the West shouldn't pursue yoga disciplines so readily is because they were designed for the Eastern psyche, which is more innately tamasic. I'm not sure I agree with that. But
did he use the word tamasic?
Yes, he does, I think. I think he does. Or else I've read somebody paraphrasing you.
Any other thoughts, friends?
But I think yoga can accommodate anybody's viewpoint, whether they're trying to transcend life or adapt to living comfortably or reasonably sanely in this world. Because surely you said it the other day, it can be as complicated as you want it, or it can be as simple as you want it. So surely it accommodates for all and everybody's reasons, perhaps. I think it does. It's all, isn't it, yoga? It's vast.
I think given the diversity of approaches, it can be very confusing to relative beginners like me. Somebody really trying to make sense of what it is about and what do I want out of it. See? And how do I go about having what I want? If they're trying to figure out. And I'm sure there'll be quite a few people in that situation.
The bar's over there, sir. Any other thoughts, friends?
Well, I'd be interested to know what you thought about structured forms of meditation. What direct my thoughts on.
Anything else, friends?
I'd be interested to hear your comments on we had mentioned before about Jan and his views on yoga. You were saying that you not at all, but didn't agree in parts with how Jan had said that it wasn't for the West. I'd like to hear your views, or some aspect of your views on it.
I'd actually like to ask something about I don't really know how to structure the question, but it's something about the teaching of yoga. Obviously I don't know, it's just about how do we know we're getting the right one? I mean, when I was being taught by Gururaji, it sounded fine to me, and perhaps, Bhagwan might have sounded okay, or the Maharishi Yogi would sound good. How do I know? How can I discern? Because I'm not saying,
But you've been through it, sir.
well, I took what I felt was good from it, and left behind what I.
See, I'm in a difficulty here because I've never had a guru. So I haven't been through the symptoms.
But I don't think I went for him. I went for what I needed, which was a method to calm the chitta, the mind. For peace, I needed peace. I wasn't unhappy either though, but there was something I wanted. And that's what I still want. I still want to continue to have that from yoga. Because all he's teaching is 4 techniques of yoga. So why not go to the mother source? That's all.
It always seems to me that the real difficulties in life are the best teachers.
I've had a really easy life, so it's fun. Really.
Perhaps you need to be a thief then.
Yes. I've got it to come.
Anything else, friends? Have you any comment on the Bhagwan thing, John? Passing through the... It is one of the great conceptual problems, this thing of conversion, isn't it? Impassioned conversion.
I hope you're not thinking that I was converted at any time.
I'm not necessarily projecting that on
right,
you,
because certainly I never felt passion.
but one does encounter it
Oh yes.
everywhere,
Yes.
often very disconcertingly. Very, very strange business. It's been my intention for several years to try and put Dr. Moraes in a corner and hear his considered views on the conversion phenomena. As a psychotherapist, as many of those who pass through that phenomena have been in dire need of help, counselling and support subsequently. And the whole phenomena of the quack guru is a great peril. We've picked up just a few of the pieces. Many people have picked up a lot of pieces. We're in a most extraordinary area. We were at Damascus House, was it a year ago, 2 years ago? There was another group. Who regarded us with averted eyes as we passed them in the corridor. And they were, all of them affluent, mainly male, products of higher education, professionals, and fundamentalist Christians. We were in this room one evening and we heard a most extraordinary sound I couldn't hope to simulate. And when we later inquired what the sound was, it was our friends in a room over there. They were practicing talking in tongues. Most extraordinary.
What does that mean, talking in tongues?
Talking in tongues? Oh, I don't know. How do you define that? How do you define it, John? It sounded most extraordinary. Most extraordinary. They were convinced we were very profoundly in error. They were most anxious to set up a dialogue and convert us from our error. And I received a subsequent visit from one appropriately learned or seemingly so in Vedic matters in order to inform us that we were on the wrong course. And it was only one possibility of salvation, and that was the way they were going. What is relevant? Yes, you haven't told us about Bhagwan yet, John.
All right, what do you want to know?
Okay, we'll accept that. Well, you are a psychologist, you see. And you've never explained to me this conversion mystery. And this need for Big Brother.
I think it is a need, an emotional need.
Mm.
But I don't know. It's a very difficult area because you project onto that person what you want, what you need.
Right.
And when it's reflected back to you, you believe that you are questioning, but in fact you're just being conditioned. But you actually believe that you are better for it. And outwardly you might appear better. But it's a very superficial thing.
See, on your Guru Maharaji thing, I found myself at Glastonbury in conversation with a highly articulate product of higher education with a beard, who emphatically assured me that Guru Maharaji, this fat youth, was King Arthur come again. Most extraordinary. I don't think we'll go into this anymore. It's going to get very complicated, friends. This is supposed to be an easy week. Easy for me, I mean, as well as you. I think I'll change the subject. Maybe we can look at it partially in the form of a parable. A parable being a symbol sequence which prompts a response from the unconscious that can constitute a discovery, which means a change in the functioning of consciousness, some modification in consciousness. All the great teachers have been storytellers. But of course it doesn't end there. And more expressive sometimes than words, even wonderful words, is the abstract symbol. Now, bringing the two together, we can say one of the great parables in the course of human development is the Genesis story of creation. And featured in that are two trees. What is called there the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. Now let's have a look at it. In the Vedic tradition, there are two trees mentioned. One is called the Ashvattha tree, the other is called the Parijata tree. And I suggest that this mystery of the two trees in Genesis that has puzzled Western thinkers in these matters for many generations can be somewhat informed and illuminated by reflecting on what is meant by the Ashvattha tree and the Parijata tree. Now, Ashvattha is definitely a puzzle, because Asva means horse. But the Ashvattha tree is quoted in the Upanishads as having its roots above in the highest and its branches here below. And he who knows them knows the Vedas. Now, in the ancient consciousness, there was no division between knowledge and light. And one of the several words for light is vidya. Linked with vidya is Veda. And it's almost the same as saying, he who knows the branches of the Ashvata tree knows light. But specifically, it is light manifesting on earth, light born into the material. Now, a tree has first its seed, and then its roots, and then its branches. And if this be the celestial realm, and that be a tiny point of the seed, and the branches are here below, this can be said to be the Ashvata tree. Conversely then, a Parijata tree is the tree, the celestial tree. It's the tree that was precious to Indra, and the Parijata tree was in Indra's heaven. And automatically we would think in terms of treasure in heaven, heavenly fruits. If our roots on earth, if the seed that has been sown on earth, now there is a recurring symbolism, isn't there? If the seed that has been sown on earth is bearing good and true fruit, then there shall be treasure in heaven. Yes? So that a Parijata tree would be the obverse of that. A sower went forth to sow, and some seed fell on fertile ground and bore good fruit. Treasure in heaven. Build up for yourselves treasure in heaven. So it can be said, there is the Ashvata tree, there is the Parijata tree, and I would suggest, you see, to the ancient mind, the horse was tremendously important. A symbol of action, power, nobility, dignity. It was an organism, and it was a breathing, dynamic creature which did great service to humankind, but it was an earthly being. It was an organic reality. So the Ashvata tree, I strongly suspect, is really saying to us, is the tree of right functioning organisms, which are right functioning because they are channels of the light manifesting on earth. Are you with me so far? Now, in the Adam and Eve story, there are these two trees. The tree of life and the tree of knowledge. The Parijata tree, fruits in heaven, is the tree of knowledge, is the tree of life. The Ashvata tree is a light manifesting on earth, knowledge being born on earth, is the tree of knowledge. Are we with it so far? But the symbols of the interlocking triangles are very ancient and they're universal. They're particularly utilized in the Indian tradition, most commonly in Tantra, and most commonly with tips touching. So you get that sort of design. But you also get a number of designs in which there is a degree of interlock. Now, in early Christian art, interestingly, the two trees are depicted as being accessible to poor old Adam and Eve, and they're shown as separate trees, but not always. Sometimes they are shown as one stem that has two fruitful areas of branch, and the right side is the tree of life, and the left side is the tree of knowledge. The indication being that they are conjoined. They are one structure. At the same time, the triangles are one structure. Now, the triangles also represent the mountain, the holy mountain, so that this would represent Mount Meru, which is the favoured Vedic term for the sacred mountain, but the sacred mountain appears in many cultures. It changes its name in different parts of the world, but the meaning is essentially the same. And that triangle describes the outline of the seated Buddha. Broad at the base, firm on the earth, rising to an apex at the celestial level. But there are two triangles. So the other mountain is the mountain of the Avatar, the one who descends to earth. The word avatar means divine incarnation, but literally it is one of the names of the earth. So it means the divine organism, the divine manifesting organically on the earth level. Marvellously expressed in the Gospel of St. John, where the literal translation is, "And the Word became flesh and pitched his tent among us, full of grace and truth." So, the tree one way presupposes, such is the balance in nature, the tree the other way. And the mountain one way presupposes the mountain the other way. Yes? And here we have interesting emphases, because the bias of the revelation of the Buddha is to awaken that impulse for human consciousness to cease to be trapped in matter, to cease to be enslaved to the physical, and to transcend, dissolve from the physical and awaken into that which is beyond all manifestation, nirvana. Conversely, one might say the Christ impulse is truly the avatar impulse to become manifest on earth, so that one can say, paradoxically, the tree of life is also the sacred mountain bringing the power of light and truth to regenerate the earth. And the tree of knowledge, which brings the light down using the tree symbolism, is using the mountain symbolism the other way round. It's paradox. Now, there are various ways of expressing these interlocking triangles. And we use one of them. I actually thought I had invented this symbol, but I hadn't. You've seen that before. And the outline of that, expressed...
That's the flag of the Israel, isn't it? That's the Jewish
6 points.
symbol.
This one?
Yeah.
It's called the AYM symbol. Oi, oi, oi.
I thought they had something.
Now,
6 points star.
now the outline, the intention was that the outline, expressed in straight lines, was the Holy Grail, you see. But I later discovered, goodness me, that in early Christian iconographic art, that that the structure of the icon is based in part on that. But that in itself was not invented by the icon makers, because I later discovered again that that symbol is much more ancient and goes back to the dervishes of Iran. And the dervishes of Iran would have claimed that their Sufi teaching derives from the ancient Magian priesthood. The inference being that this which I thought I had invented, goodness me, had been known to human consciousness for many, many, many generations. Now, the Star of David that you're referring to shows the biggest interlock of them all. Because the point is penetrating.
Oh,
And in one sense, that is the most interesting. Because a tree, one could say, has... Yes, we can use this one. A tree has roots, and the roots are necessarily... Sorry, a tree has roots, and roots are necessarily that shape, approximately the same sort of outline as the branches, yes? And from some sort of central point, it all expands into the area of fruitfulness. But here, where it penetrates the base, you also have the sign of the seed of the light down into the earth. And moving from the earth, the apex of Mount Meru being the seed that transmutes into the heavenly level, and one would suppose stimulates the cycle of heavenly manifestation upon earth. Are you with me? And the other stimulates the tree of knowledge. Now, if you look at the human structure, physiologically, in one sense you could say we're a sort of alimentary canal propped up by a flexible rod called the spinal cord. But looked at in more solid terms, it's an interesting fact that we are two triangles. That there is the triangle of the torso, partly described, and there's the triangle of the pelvis, describes an outline of a triangle. And usually, approximately speaking, the male triangle is wider at the top and larger at the top, the torso triangle, and the pelvic triangle is smaller, and in the female there is a larger pelvic triangle and a correspondingly smaller torso triangle. So that this thing of the interlocking triangles is in fact describing that manifestation we call a humanoid, we call a human being. Also of interest, and we should note that, is in yoga the particular importance of the spinal cord and the esoteric teaching associated with it. And that is called the Merudanda. Literally, the word Danda means stick or rod. Meru is the sacred mountain, Mount Meru. And Mount Meru is the center of the earth from which the spiritual power is generated that creates the soma, that brings humanity, elevates humanity to its spiritual destiny. Are you with me? Do you see all the connections? Now, what I'm drawing together is the fact that whether we look at it in terms of the tree of life or the tree of knowledge, whether we look at it in terms of the trees or as the triangle representing the mountain symbols, either way, it is directly related, symbolically, to the human structure, which is said to be the microcosm of the Purush, the cosmic man, and that the universe itself, in its subtle anatomy, describes those proportions. That's the ancient teaching. We are microcosm within macrocosm. Now, where does this leave us? It leaves us with, first of all, human consciousness manifesting at the end of this 20th century in utterly unique circumstances. At no other time in the history of this planet has there been such a prodigious quantity of humankind ever increasing to very dangerous proportions, ever increasing. The manifestation of the energy of human consciousness over the surface of the earth has never been the same. This is unique. And the collective psyche of the earth must, of necessity, be vibrating towards crisis pitch as it's never done before. Just looked at quantitatively, it has never been the same. And we are compressed. We are forced into interaction, forced into a form of relationship. Everywhere in our civilization, there is a lack of space. There is a need for space. There is a need for withdrawal. That's partly why we're here, on retreat. Now, one of the wonderful discoveries that can come is to find some of the potent stories, the great parables, you will find in the Mahabharata. Now, people in the yoga world have set syllabi sometimes, and on the syllabus is the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is approached as the apex, the culmination of Hindu wisdom, and is studied abstractly as such. Now, as the culmination of Hindu wisdom, I'm sure that's right. But I do think we miss a tremendous amount in not preceding a structured study of Bhagavad Gita with a casual, easy, happy read of the great stories of the Mahabharata. And there are wonderful revelations of the human dilemma, humanity in crisis, descriptions of behavior patterns of the human psyche under the most pressured situations, but recurring situations, archetypal recurring situations. And it describes the relative human states that led to the series of conflicts that produced the Battle of Kurukshetra and the concomitant revelation of Krishna on the battlefield, not on the mountaintop, not in the monastery, on the battlefield. And that wonderful affirmation, there is so much in common between the teachings attributed to Krishna and the teachings attributed to Christ. So much in common. Jesus said, "Fear not, little flock, for lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." Krishna was even more emphatic on the same theme, and tremendously powerful in the imagery he used. The ancient symbol of the chariot is immensely expressive. Arjuna, the world's greatest archer. Archery meant action perfected in the sense that he used it. The perfect action. The supreme warrior was not going to act on the battlefield and Krishna makes it plain, he's got to. And Krishna says, I will not take part in the battle, but I will drive the chariot. Therefore, Arjuna, stand up and fight. Then I will drive the chariot. The chariot is the here and now. It's an all levels Dharma that is advocated in Bhagavad Gita. Not renounce the world. Stop the world, I want to get off. What is to be done, what is to be discovered, what is to be emphasized in the yoga appropriate for the here and now? It must be holistic. And if it's not, nature, which is the teacher, nature will present us with problem after problem after problem until we say, I must attempt to deal with this problem of my collapsing physical condition, when I have responsibilities and demands all round. You must have an organism, you must have a chariot that is fit for the Lord to utilize.
Assuming there is a load.
Let's not go to that. So, friends, I've actually come full circle from my teenage questing some 40 plus years ago. Listening to Dr. Hari Prasad Shastri, who was a very interesting man, very worthwhile man, Trevor Leggett's guru. Don't waste time on the body. All these futilities must be set aside. Only meditation matters. But you looked at dear Dr. Shastri, some little fat man waddling along, physically incapable of meeting any real demands. The best will in the world. Nature is forcing us to find out how to connect with the healing power of life, the resurrection impulse in life, that which works on all levels. There's no such thing as the higher yoga, which the Raj Yogis would tell us about. I used to use the phrase like that. I used to be most scornful about Hatha Yoga in my teens. But nature induces us to grow up. So, as the interlocking triangles reveal to us, there must be treasure in heaven and treasure on earth. And we must have a holistic approach that seeks to serve, to heal, to grow, as well as to renounce. to embrace life as well as to renounce. I do understand the impulse to retire to the mountaintop. I do understand that. It's in the samskaras. In here and now, nature says no. Boys like you shall stay here and do a bit of hard graft for a change. In the lunatic asylum that we call civilization. This is a remarkable book, great book. It speaks of the other shore. It's a phrase particularly used in Buddhism. There's a quote from the Heart Sutra. Which means gone, gone, gone to the other shore, landed at the other shore. Now, the ancient symbol, especially in the Mongolian mystical tradition, of the great ocean and the solitary boat on the waters, reaching out for the other shore, is a very common one. This is the other shore. This is the moment of our final destination, the ultimate goal of all creation, the conclusion of all history and all life. In your kitchen, at your work, wherever you are, you have arrived at your final goal. Intellectually, you may think of some future, but in truth, this moment is the only reality. You are the true life and have nothing more to seek. There are two strands to this. They are not, I would suggest in the balanced view, mutually exclusive. They must be in balance. Let me put it this way. Many years ago, I read about one of the great debates and the great quarrels in the history of the early church between those who worshipped icons and the iconoclasts who smashed all the icons. At that time, I had no doubt who was in the greater delusion. Those in the greater delusion were those limited souls who bowed down before icons and reverence things made by men as divine. Then this curious thing happened. Much later, I discovered the AYM symbol was at the center of the icon. And there was a strange teaching associated with the icon. It was this. Of course, the early Greek church, see, it was essentially a quarrel between the Greeks and the Semites. The Semites, the Jews, those who became the Jews and the Arabs and so on, the Muslims, maintained there must be no image representing the divine. Humanity had fallen into tremendous error and even evil because of worship of idols. And that's so right. That's so right. But the true artist who made the icon had another view. And the other view was that the phenomenon of divine incarnation had not occurred once, but it was an ongoing process in nature. And if the human energies, the human psyche, is rightly attuned to the source of all inspiration, then the human vessel becomes part of the divine purpose and manifests divine light through its creations on earth. And the true artist, therefore, is as much a part of the divine revelation as any priest or prophet, is in fact part of the process of prophecy. And they maintained that such was the power of attunement that the physical form that they had been working with carried in it the impulse of that divine inspiration. There may be something in that. Great art, in many forms, is part of revelation, is part of the Spirit speaking to humankind. Now, there are these two impulses: to liberate trapped consciousness from containment within matter and find the infinite. Yes, that's so right. Conversely, there is the obligation upon the human entity to be the vessel for the incarnation of the avatar impulse on earth, the Buddha impulse, the Christ impulse on earth. And it seems to me, for what it's worth, that the teaching of the Purush, the ancient Vedic teaching, as Don Bede Griffiths maintains, is essentially the same as St. Paul's teaching of the cosmic Christ. And that, however remote from our present understanding it may be, there is this archetypal imprint in human consciousness that one might call, for convenience, the Christ imprint, and has been known to the sages, the seers of every age. In some ways, Iran is of particular significance in the spiritual development of the human race. Now, this is a very interesting little book, which you can't get anymore, I'm afraid. Been out of print a long time. It belongs to Mrs. Cheeseman. I nicked it one day when she wasn't looking, but she'll get it back. Here is a great Iranian mystic, a Muslim, speaking. Now, when he speaks, he touches on two extremes, both anathema to Islam. One, some of the things he says are straight out of the Upanishads. I am God. I am God. And nothing could be more blasphemous to the Muslim. Another thing he says, let me see if I can find it, can only be seems to me, referring to the cosmic Christ, whose imprint will reveal itself in the human psyche. If I can find it. The Handsome King. It's a marvellous parable. There was once a king so goodly to look upon that he had no equal in the realm of beauty. The whole world was full of his fame, and every creature was smitten with desire for him. Sometimes he used to go forth with his countenance veiled, lest men should see his beauty and perish, for thousands died out of love to him. Such is love and its effect. Each one who sought to see his beauty unveiled willingly gave up his life therefore. To die for the love of that heart-ravishing countenance was better than to live 100 lives apart from him. None could endure to be without him for a moment, and none was able to remain in his company. Men were dying continually because of their desire for him. Strange it was that none could either bear his presence or do without him. To anyone who had the power to behold him for a moment, the king displayed his face unveiled, while those who were unable to bear the sight of him contented themselves with the joy of hearing his voice. Since not one was worthy of him, all died broken-hearted for the love of him. The king therefore caused a mirror to be made, so that he could be regarded in this mirror. The palace of the king was suitably adorned, and the mirror was set in its place. The king went to the top of the palace and looked into the mirror, so that his face was reflected in the mirror, and by this means everyone was enabled to look upon that countenance of wondrous beauty. So also, if thou dost cherish the beauty of the beloved, know that thine heart is the mirror in which thou dost behold him. Take thine heart in thine hand, and behold his beauty there. Make a mirror of thy soul, and contemplate his glory therein. He is thy king in the palace of majesty, a palace made radiant by the sun of that divine loveliness. Contemplate thy king within thine own heart. Behold his throne within, a mere atom. In one utterance that embraces the Upanishads, and, one might say, the Christ consciousness. I'll just mention one other little story. Rabindranath Tagore did not invent it, he put it into a modern poem, which he himself translated into English, but it was a shortened version of a more ancient, fuller tale. But in brief it goes like this. It's very profound. The poet had wandered many, many years questing the great king. He knew that if he persevered, the king would manifest. But he was now getting older, he was tired, He was penniless. He had nothing. All had been given up in this seemingly endless and fruitless quest for the king. And he was on a long, long, hot, dusty road. And in despair, the poet sat down, possessing nothing but a little bag with a few bits of rice in it. All he had left. And then, in the far distance, he sees dust on the horizon. And it comes closer, and he sees it is the chariot of the king. The king is coming. He then knew that when the king came, it would all be fulfilled. Nothing would have been in vain. The king would give him everything he needed. And the great king stopped and looked down at the emaciated poet. And the poet held up his hand to receive, and to his amazement, the king gave him nothing. The king held out his hand. And the poet had nothing to give. Amazed, bitterly disappointed, he reached into his rice bowl and took out 1 grain of rice and gave it to the king, who saluted and rode on. Desolate, the poet decided to eat. He opened his bag of rice, and there he saw that 1 grain of rice had turned to gold. In Mahabharata, after the Battle of Kurukshetra, there's an extraordinary scene. I personally believe, can't prove it, I happen to think it, that Krishna banished the Soma teaching from India.
So he banished what?
The Soma teaching from India. It moved westwards. The scene is Krishna is crossing a barren desert, and he finds an ascetic who has renounced everything, alone in the barren desert, who greets Krishna and has a conclusion about the Battle of Kurukshetra, which is a wrong conclusion. Krishna corrects his false conclusion. He then says, I thirst. Krishna, give me water. Now there's a symbolism for you. The living water from the hands of the avatar. Krishna manifests the living water to the ascetic, the wizened old ascetic, living in the desert. But the form in which it appears to the ascetic is offensive and unpalatable. It's very interesting imagery. There's something to be said, something to be learned from that tale. It's time for tea, goodness me.